Hey, Shining Otaku, welcome to the new season of Shining Spotlight. Today, we have a rising talent in the manga scene. He's well studied with a background in fine art, a professional therapist, an active force within the community, personifying the struggles of cultural triumph through his work with a supernatural flair, the creator of the new manga series Third Winter, which you can find in Origami Super Punch, and also a member of Shining Otaku. Today we have the undeniable Che Baker, my friend. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
How you doing today? What's going on?
All right, so obviously it's a little bit different today. As you guys know, Che also co-hosts the show, but something that we realized, Che's never actually had an interview on the show. So, it only makes sense to actually interview Che today. So, of course, you have been at art for quite a while. I know that. But just for people out there who don't really know, a lot of the Shining Otaku out there, how did you get into creating art and, or not even just art, writing? How did you get into that?
Well, like many of us, you have an interest early, right? So I didn't realize I can draw until, well, based on my memory, I can draw as long as I can remember, right? My kindergarten teacher pointed it out. According to my mother, I was drawing since 3, 4 years old, Disney characters. So I had a love of just drawing. And then, of course, I just fell in love with anime, right? I watched a lot of cartoons, Spider-Man, X-Men, all the whole 9 yards, Justice League. But Toonami came and introduced me to anime. Dragon Ball Z specifically. So, typical Detroit public school kid. We all would draw Dragon Ball Z pictures and Super Saiyan 25. I don't know how we found this on Google, but we did. So we were just excited to be a part of the creative process. And I said, okay, this is something I would want to do. So I drew my whole life. I went to college for initially an fine arts degree at Central State University. And I transferred to Wayne State and earned my bachelor's in sociology. So I didn't want to retake classes, but I never wanted to stop drawing. I stayed a creative. I stayed with a sketch pad. I stayed with artwork. I just continued to draw. And I had a lot to say coming from the inner city. So I said, okay, it's a lot of things out here. I'm inspired by things like the Boondocks. And, you're looking at all your favorite, cartoons, anime, fiction, and then you connect it to your lives and characters that you identify with. So that's what led me to, okay, I want to create this. I don't want to just draw pinups. I want to create a story. And just being a movie buff and into comic books and manga, it just continued to grow, and I just continued to be inspired, and that's how I got here.
All right, so now me and you talk every day, but I know anybody out there who may be listening to this, they may not know. When you say pinups, what do you mean by pinups? What are pinups?
That's a good question. I didn't think about that. Pinups are like poster art, right? So if I just want to draw some cool art to put on the wall, that's a pinup. If that's commission, that could be a pinup. But sequential art, something that Mark taught us, our mentor, is, it's the storyboarding, it's the paneling, it's comic books, it's manga, it's manhwa. Those are examples of like sequential art because you're telling a story.
So is there a difference between what we're seeing here, right here on the screen that you did, versus maybe this, for example?
Yes, that's pinup. That was just me creating. And I just decided I'm going to just draw something. You know what I mean? That was just me creating. And just a cool picture based on some ideologies, some things I like. I like monsters and werewolves and all the things. So, yeah.
Okay. So when you decided to do, for example, Third Winter, which, again, for anybody who's watching, that's one of the latest series that actually is going to be in Origami Super Punch, which should have already been out, but we'll talk about that later towards the end of this. What inspired you to create it? What kind of story is this? Is it just something that a typical, shonen that people see the same thing kind of come out where it's like, oh, these just monsters? Or what makes your story any different than anyone else's out there?
Well, Third Winter, it comes from, one, the title came from me and you just talking, and being from Michigan. We always hear about a first winter, a second winter, a third winter, spring, summer, fall. That's just how it works, right? And when you like Third Winter is a good title, and I'm like, ooh, the storm. So my profession is I'm a clinician, so counseling, therapy. That's what I earned my master's in, and I wanted to connect mental health to the Black experience, but just something quick, something to make a debut, something I was interested in, I could connect the dots with. So Third Winter is more seinen. It may look shonen, but it's more inspired by the Berserks, where it's more the what is it? It's, I don't want to say like mind-boggling or anything like that, but existential crisis. That's the word I was looking for. So it's a lot of that is happening in the story.
Okay. So why is that important? Do you feel like that's not something that we see a lot, like in media already? Because you see a lot of stories, especially now. People always talk about, oh man, woke culture and all that. I'm not saying that's me, but me and you always hear people talking about this is woke and that is woke. So
Exactly. So it is a little bit of lag on your end if you can't hear me. So it's just a little bit frozen. I'm not sure if it's the Wi-Fi. Can you see me? Are you back?
yes, I'm back. Sorry, I
Okay,
don't
I
know why
heard
it
a
lagged
dog.
on my end.
Yep, it did. So I'm putting headphones in because I hear a dog barking. So give me 1 second. This is
Oh,
not
I'm
the.
like, this is one time I think my dogs are actually behaving, which is nice.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear
Can you
you
hear me?
now. Yes, we
Perfect.
can.
Perfect. Perfect. That's great. That's great. Okay.
I,
So
I
yeah.
see my
So
buddy Antoine commented. We can see and hear you. You're done, brother. Okay, thanks. Shout out to Antoine. We'll
shout
continue.
out to Antoine. And what was the question again? Sorry about that.
So when people talk about woke culture out here, how do you think your average reader will perceive your story? I mean, I have my different opinions on, when people talk about that, but I'm obviously this is not my time to talk. This is your time. So I'm curious, what do you think about when you have a story like Third Winter? How do you think that's going to be received, by your average person, or are you not targeting your average person with this kind of story?
Received. I think it will be received well based on the audience. So to give a little bit more detail, the story, just to give you a synopsis, a log line, it's about a black man, maybe 40, 35, 40 years old, who is having a crisis. His world is literally turned upside down. And it goes from having a bad, you know, drunk day to pretty much the supernatural. And it's like, okay, what is happening? Like, I'm confused. How did my reality change? And this little boy is navigating this reality that has shifted, and he's just like, what's happening here? I'm confused. So I'm targeting, particularly it's a black story, but it's not just, it's really just things I see on a regular basis from my experiences, my peers' experiences. So anybody can read it, but it's really a message, and it's really just a start of a conversation. So this story is pretty much a conversation piece. So do I expect it to be received like a isekai or a battle manga? No. However, it's one of those things that I see more like a hidden gem. For example, Dragon Ball Z is extremely popular, right? Berserk is popular too, but it's not as popular as Dragon Ball Z, but it became very popular over time. But it was one of those hidden gems where you're like, oh, what is this? This has been out since the 80s? This has been going on this long? Oh, this is
Mm-hmm.
actually a really good story. But you find that out because you look at the character development, the writing, all the things. There's a voice, there's a message, and it challenges thought. So that's what I want to do. I want my readers to think. It's similar to a movie like the Jordan Peele, Ryan Coogler effect, where it's
Mm-hmm.
always a lot of symbolism. So if you're not interested as much in symbolism, I still think we can enjoy it. That's why I got monsters there. Because like, okay, just some cool shit if that's gonna be the case. But
Mm-hmm.
it's also a layer behind it. So it's peeling back an onion. So I don't expect everybody to love my story, but I think that it'll grow over time. And honestly, me as a newer OEL creator, I will become a better writer and artist in regards to developing my stories better.
You just said a bad word.
What's that word?
Oh yeah, I can't believe you said that. And I'm messing with you.
I was
You
super
know
confused.
that sometimes in the community people is a polarizing term. Some people say it, some people don't. I know a lot of us say it. I say it, but I that's I only said to just kind of mess with you. But don't mind me, folks. Don't mind me. But in any case, okay. So if I'm a newer artist trying to come into this, right? Because
Mhm.
even though you've been doing art your whole life, right?
Yeah,
So where do you recommend starting? Because not everybody has Mark, for example, to kind of
right.
teach them.
Of course.
If I'm literally ground zero, where do I begin?
I mean, honestly, picking up a pencil and paper was the start for me. So I could just talk about my journey and kind of relate it back. I was an artist. People know talent young, right? You draw, people like, okay, you draw, you draw, you draw. Used to charge people, I'll draw you this picture for $5, whatever the case may be, right? And I went to school eventually. I would take art classes in high school. I took art classes in college. And people seeing me draw a lot, I happened to run into a friend of ours, Q Myrick, shout out to Q, and he encouraged me to meet everybody at a local bar in the Metro Detroit area, Queens Bar, and that's we connected with the older comic book uh, creator crowd. So we had a trajectory. So that was my trajectory, and I was already established in a career as a social worker, but I always drew, and I knew that's something I wanted to do, and I just didn't know where to start. So, and now what I would do is one, continue to always draw and create. Now we have social media. So if you're drawing and posting, you'll get traction, right? If you're drawing consistently, whether you're in college, whether you work a regular 9 to 5, if it's in you to create, people will notice it and you will be able to eventually connect with someone. But I would go to, you can go to college for creative studies, you can go to art school, and you could just
Scat.
start to market. You should go to SCAT, exactly. And you just market yourself. So what I really did was just put my 10,000 hours in. I never stopped creating. And the more I created, the more opportunities kind of came. So opportunity needs preparation. So I think you have to prepare yourself for an opportunity by creating, and people will notice the talent. So I think it's a little bit easier now than it was back in the day because you have the access of the internet to be able to track down who you need to track down, find out where you need to go, and follow that process.
Okay. Now, was Origami Super Punch, was this the first anthology that you've actually worked on?
Yes.
Okay. What was that experience like for you? Be honest. You could say,
It
oh
was
man, it was
tough.
terrible.
It was tough. It was tough for different reasons. To be fair, I think if I was younger, it would have been easier for me. But I was older and like established in a career. So, or I am 33 going on 34. We probably completed the project. I was 33 last year, but it was a year-long process, so 32. By this time, I've already been to school. I've already started social work and therapy and all the things. So it was really setting a time aside to focus because you don't just immediately get money from these things. You're building IP, intellectual property. So going through the editing process actually wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. But you have to learn, right? You have to learn how to create a story, how to flesh out your characters. You're being asked questions that you have to dig deep in for yourself, particularly with me and my story. So the process was fun at times, like creating the characters, coming up with the concepts. However, being locked into a deadline, even though I personally like deadlines, it still was difficult, particularly because you used to deadlines for work, right? 9 to 5, you got a report to do, or you have this to do. You clock in, you clock out. Creating, you can be on a high. It's like a mental health. It's like depression, right? Or be a manic. If you're manic, you can just go hours, 3, 4, 5 days straight and just focused. When you down in the dumps, you drop. So you're pulling because it's an emotional process. And sometimes time is not on your side. However, time is very necessary. So I learned a lot. So I appreciate the process. A lot of the process was enjoyable, but some parts of the process was very difficult.
Okay. So what would you say, amongst working with creators is probably the most difficult part?
Working with creators. That's
So
the
people,
answer.
it's one of those things people debate all the time, and you and me talk about this all the time. Like, are artists more difficult to work with or are writers? Writers always get the reputation for trying to control the hand of the artist, which is very true. That happens a lot, and then artists probably get more of a reputation for going through a funk and, kind of acting like, rock stars and like they're pretty much the only one that's needed to do everything. But both of them don't really realize they come together. I mean, you do have some people who do both. You have a lot of people who
Right.
do both, but
Right.
and like you do both, for example. But then you have some where some people maybe they're more creatively strong in one area more than the other. So, what is your take when it comes to how that dynamic is? What is your opinion on the dynamic between an artist and a writer?
One, I think it's for me personally, because I'm newer, in comparison to a lot of veterans. I personally enjoy. I don't mind working with another writer. I would like to co-write or always. I see somebody said talent is always the hardest to work with in any industry. That's true. Um, I definitely think it was very, very. It could be very difficult if y'all not on the same page with the vision. I think that's the big part. So if the writer and the artist are working on a story together and the artist buys into the story or the concept, I think you get a better response, right? But I think that if it's just like a commission piece and something, and we can't even say that this they're not getting paid because there are times as me and people will get paid and still give you a difficult time to get the product done. So I think it's difficult because art is an emotional process and so is writing. But I think the writer already has a vision, and because they need somebody to actually make the vision physical, it's a little bit more pressure on that side, which is understandable. And for the artist, they want to move at their pace because I may not feel like it today. It may take me 8 hours to do a page, right? Which makes sense because I have to think about the page, I have to panel the page out, I have to lay out the characters. So it's more than just, okay, let me use my hand and physically draw. That's what the pinup is, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you said, hey, can you give me a picture of Super Saiyan Goku 4 from GT and from Super within 2 weeks, watercolor, that's doable, right? That's a pinup. It's
Mm-hmm.
much harder to say, hey, I need you to do 30 pages for me. I've already written it out. Follow these prompts, and I need it to look this way in order to get this done.
Give me a
Because
30
it's not
page story
always
where
as fun.
Gohan is actually relevant again. No, I'm playing.
Exactly, right? So it makes it a little bit more difficult for the artist. So some of it is artists being rock stars, which I agree. But I also think some of it is like art is labor intensive. So because it's physically labor intensive, I think it makes it a little bit more difficult for artists sometimes to fully focus on the story and really buy into it, to feel comfortable being a part of that process.
So you don't think it's like, me and you talk about this a lot too. Like, artists just kind of, you know, having to choose between whether or not they're a professional or a hobbyist.
I think that definitely has something to do with it. I absolutely
Mm-hmm.
think that. But I still think even a professional artist has days where it's hard for them to work. They just push through. And I think the difference is at that point you're making money, right? So let's say like Jim Lee makes a lot of money as a penciler, right? He
Mm-hmm.
makes a lot of money. He had to build himself up to get to that point, but he makes a lot of money, right? So when you're getting paid significant amount of dollars, that's gonna motivate you, right? But it's much harder for me to just draw and I'm building up to something, right? It's much harder. I'm building and I know that I may not see a return for a significant amount of time. I just have to literally be internally motivated until we get to that point. Because you will get to that point. If you stay the course, you will get to the point you need to get to in order to make money from your art or from your writing. However, you have to be extremely motivated to be a professional because you don't get the money immediately. It's not like me now, where if you go to a 9 to 5, you get a contract, you 3 weeks in the hole at the most, but you have a consistent paycheck, whether it's every week or every 2 weeks. So you come into the job, you get paid for training. It doesn't necessarily work like that all the time. Now I know they have different like processes for different organizations and groups, right? So some people are getting paid to help you do page work, or some people are getting paid immediately to get a project done just as an artist. But if you're creating your own IP, it takes a little bit more because most of the time you're writing and you're drawing. So it takes more time to get that done, especially because it's not like you're paying yourself but you won't get paid until later on the back end. So create, which is good. It's like creating an album for music, right? You may go through a 2 year process creating this album and you may not get a return for that third year, but you still have to go in the studio every day and create and write and sing and sleep. And you're going to have moments where you're in a funk in and out. So I don't think the creative space as a physical artist is much different than the creative space as a musician. So I definitely think that you have to make a decision if you want to be a professional, but I don't think it's easy when we throw the term professional versus hobbyist. And I think this harder for me specifically, the older I got, the harder it was because I had more responsibilities. If I would have discovered this dynamic at 19, 20, and I ushered into it, it would have been easier because that would have been my direct trajectory, right? So I think that also plays a role as your personal life as you jump into the creative field, because you're going to have to make certain sacrifices and decisions. Like, you know what? I want to get a part-time job. The economy bad. I already work full-time here. I need to make some money, right? However, if you have a vision and you're like, well, actually, if we stick to the course, we actually can get the bigger bag, the bigger amount of money, the bigger intellectual property. We can make all the connections we need, continue to create the product. You may sacrifice and say, okay, this year going to be a tight year where I'm going to focus on my art and I'm really going to invest. And it's not about just making an immediate dollar, right? It's about me thinking long term. So I think it's a lot of things to consider transitioning from. One, as a hobby, you love it. You do it because it's a coping skill. It's hard when your coping skill becomes your job. Somebody may sing because they love to sing. They sing at church every Sunday. And then when they become a recording artist, they're going to sing things they don't want to sing anymore to make the money. Now your record label wants you to produce this. And it's like, hey, that's not really my sound. But it's like, okay, this is what you need to do to break into the market, right? So you may sacrifice how you feel about it and still do it anyway, but it still makes it a difficult transition and journey because you're an artist and you're sensitive about your shit, just like Erykah Badu say. And I think that just goes across the board.
Now I'm gonna have call on Tyrone.
Exactly.
I don't want to start singing that whole song, other than this thing be copyrighted. It's like, no,
Exactly.
My vocals are not that good. It'd probably be like, what the heck is he singing? But okay. So I know the transition for you. You are mainly traditional. I know you like drawing on paper.
I do.
But I can remember when you first got like a tablet, and how you kind of talked about when you would draw on a tablet, it was like drawing on ice.
It was.
Yeah. So what is your experience with the transition to digital? Do you feel like you'll ever fully transition to it, or do you think an artist needs to, or you think it's not really necessary?
I think I will transition more digitally. Will I ever go completely digital? I'm not sure. But can I go? I actually don't mind digital as much now. Traditional is tradition. I was just used to using paper. Once the more I actually just went through being uncomfortable and just working digitally and learning the technology, because that's a big part of it too, is relearning something, right? Learning the different things on Photoshop, Clip Studios, Procreate. It's easy once you know everything, going through the lessons and being taught it. Then it's like, oh, this is more convenient than traditional. But it's just a feeling of putting pencil to paper that just is a coping skill for me, because that's something I've done since I was 3 years old. So part of it is just my natural inkling and not necessarily want to be uncomfortable. But to answer your question, I think you need both, right? So if I need to get a project done and we moving at a faster pace, I'm going to be more digital. Because, okay, listen, I could do this shortcut for the background. I could do this to straighten out my lines. If I mess up, I don't have to.
Do you find yourself moving faster on or slower on digital versus traditional? Like, does it affect your speed and quality at all?
Speed, yeah. For me, I'm faster digital. But
on the digital.
I'm faster digital, better traditional. Because I'm taking my time traditional. With the like the Procreate or the Clip Studios, I'm fast because I can edit certain things. So if I mess up on a background traditional, I either got to start over completely, as in get another sheet of paper, or make a bunch of erase marks. That's going to take longer, even though I may be more precise there. Where if I mess up on the background digitally, I could just press backspace and that's done. And
so what was this done? Was this done digital or traditional?
Both. So my process, just to give you an idea, I start traditional, I scan, and then I ink, and I draw, and make my edits digitally. So I panel out and do a base rough draft traditional, and then I just transition it and then use those tools.
Okay. So everything that you did, in Super Punch had a combination of both then.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
all right. All right. So in just a minute here, folks, we're gonna, we're at the pretty much the halfway point of this interview. We're gonna go ahead. Actually, we can go into this right now. There's gonna be well, not a break, but we're gonna give you guys a little quick spiel on our sister show, the Honeycomb Hideout. So the Honeycomb Hideout is basically Howard Stern for geeks. Anything you want to hear about nerd culture, if you want to hear about controversial topics that have to do with the professional space of creating comics, that sort of thing, you definitely want to check out the Honeycomb Hideout. It is on, I believe, Apple Podcasts. It's on Spotify, all the major platforms you can listen to podcasts. I believe it's also on YouTube as well. We're going to put links to it down below for you guys to be able to check that out. But that is our sister show, the Honeycomb Hideout, hosted by Joe and Christine. So make sure you check that out. Right now, I believe Mark is the interim host while Joe and Christine are temporarily out at the moment. But the show is still the same, still has the same vigor and quality. So you want to make sure you check that show out. Anyway, back to the show. All right. So, but yeah, it's interesting to do this interview because, like I said, me and you talk every day. Pretty much. So when I'm talking to Shay right now, just letting everybody know, I'm having to, obviously I have things that I can ask, but I'm also thinking about, well, what do you guys not know about Shay? So I'm kind of pulling from that and kind of going over everything. So like, of course, we've talked about Third Winter and we've talked a little bit about your creative process and, just some brief thoughts on how you feel about the industry. But how do you, when you look at the way that the industry is progressing, like looking at the generations, like say, for example, if we look at like back in the days of Image in the 90s or even before then, do you feel like the creative quality is, well, what's your take on the creative quality and the direction of comics at this point? We have companies like, what's an example of one? We have, different OEL companies that exist now
like
that
Saturday
didn't exist back then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like even Saturday AM, Noir Caesar, some of those groups. So like, do you think that the creative side is improving or declining? Like, what is your take on the creative industry now versus maybe 30 years ago?
I think it's ebbs and flows. I think it's ebbs and flows like politics. I think you know how in politics you might go 20 years conservative, 20 years liberal, and you kind of always trying to find that balance. I think it's the same thing creatively, right? And what I mean by that is like 30 years ago,
you're going in and out just a little bit, Shay. Just
okay. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Am I okay? Still in and out? Hello? Hello? Can you hear me? Having some technical difficulties.
Waiting for it to catch up a little bit.
Okay.
We're waiting for it to catch up just a little bit.
Okay.
Yes. Can you hear me? Are you able to hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Bear with us just for one moment here.
Well,
all right. I think we're back.
Okay, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I don't know what happened, but
listen, my Wi-Fi
anyway,
is A1. I don't know what's going on over there.
Oh no, it wasn't you. It was me this time. I think it booted me out. I wasn't allowed to be in the shining spotlight. Your shine was too great. But anyway, continue.
So you repeat the question for me. Oh, about the industry. I was saying like I think it's ebbs and flows in industry. I think it's different based on different generations because different generations have different voices. So I think if you think in 30 years ago, what is that? Late 90s, maybe. I think it was more money. So therefore, you know, and a lot of ideas felt more original. And I think now you have a little bit, not that you do have original ideas still, but I think that you have more of a, since it's not as new, you have more of a recycle. Like I think about it like the music industry, let's say rap. I think in the 80s and 90s, it was about being original and having a voice, something new and fresh. That's how I feel about comics when it comes to entertainment creativity. Once you can capitalize something and you can make money off of it, you recycle the product. So I think that's why you have 1,000 isekais. Like they've got like an isekai like DC show, right? What's going on, Johnny Fitz? But like it feels like it's whatever works. Oh, okay, this formula works. We're gonna throw something there. Okay, this formula works, and then you see that cycle for 10 years. Then you see another cycle for 10 years. Then you see another cycle for 10 years. So those are my thoughts. I think it's a lot of great creatives and a lot of new things that are happening that are very, very good. But and especially in the um OEL space, the original English language manga space, where we're having a lot of people come and show different voices. Like in our anthology, I think we have a lot of different voices in the Origami Super Punch. So I think that's a good thing. So everybody's voice is the same, similar to when you have Shonen Jump, even though it's Shonen, all the stories are uh-oh. Of course you are, sir. Of course you are. So I'm reading what Imaginos Pete just said. He said, I'm here to cause trouble from the peanut gallery. So that's funny. But yeah, I think that we just have to figure out how to tailor our voice a little bit better in this generation.
You know, I think when it comes to when it comes to how things are now, because you have a lot of people debate, like you think about when anytime we talk to Mark, like he always talk about John Byrne, how good John Byrne is. And John Byrne, if you're watching this, I do want to say I respect your work. So this is not, me saying anything about, John Byrne's work, but it's just interesting how every generation has their guy that they may really look at their work, and a lot of people might aspire to, to, I'm not gonna say model their work after it, but kind of, it sparks them creatively, So in Mark's day, John Byrne, had made a lot of, a lot of creatives back then, inspired a lot of them, with their fundamentally and, just, with his work. But nowadays, I mean, it's interesting to think about who that might be, even for our generation or even the generations now. I'm sure, like, me and you talk about like Yusuke Murata, for example, a lot, or you mentioned Boichi, everybody kind of has their guy. But
right.
So I think you had a fair point about that. Now, do you think that what do you feel like the newer generation can learn from the older generation when it comes down to creative skills?
Fundamentals. So learning the fundamentals of not just the artwork, but storytelling. I think the old generation had things that they wanted to say. And I think that that's important, like learning the structure and the character development. You know what I mean? I think that's something we have to focus more on. So a story that I think does a great job of like telling a story in an older generation would be, I'm going back to Berserk, right? Where you actually are following a character and you let the character kind of dictate what happens. You true to the character, you true to the story. I think that we have to work on that where it's not so, I don't want to say convoluted, but I feel like sometimes we force points, we force things. It doesn't even, sometimes it may not feel as organic when we're creating because we're creating from a fan perspective. And I think being inspired as fans is why we do this. But I think once you become the professional and not the hobbyist, you have to think about what you want to do and what you want to say in your stories. So I think that's something we have to learn from. Instead of saying, I just want to do cool shit that I saw my favorite mangaka do or my favorite anime do, I want to recreate that in my own way. Versus like, you know what? I'm inspired by Yu Yu Hakusho. I'm inspired by Togashi. I'm inspired by Mark Dudley. I'm inspired by all of these different things, but I still have something that I want to do. I'm just pulling from these different places. So I think we have to do a better job of learning how to pull and not copy, right? Not recreate the same things over and over again. So that's just my personal opinion.
Okay. Okay. I mean, I think that was a fair point.
Originality. I think being originality is important.
But what is
Taking risks.
originality? What does that mean?
Well, I think for me, like Dragon Ball Z was an original concept. That's why I did well. A lot of
I
shit
don't want
after
to
that.
see my characters be any different than they were before. I want them to be the same as they were in the beginning, as they are in the end. I'm kidding. I'm trolling.
Goku, the only flat art character that I love. Goku has been Goku the whole time, and it's cool. But it's an original, right? He created that dynamic and it's fruit from the tree. A good example of what I mean by a great job of that would be like, let's say Naruto, Bleach, One Piece. All three of them are the big three, right? They're all different. They have some similarity, but they all have like the main characters have similarity to Goku, right? Not even necessarily physically, but like you can tell all of them when I'm surprised when they all say, "Hey, I'm inspired by Akira Toriyama, rest in peace." Like you can see it, but they still have their own story. Even if that's something Goku would do. Like Naruto and Goku have a lot of similarity, but they're also two different characters too. So to pull from other characters, to pull from other creators, I think is very important. But I think that as long as we pay respect to it, right? We pay respect to our forefathers, but we also still keep our uniqueness. I think that's how you bridge the gap and transition creatively from one generation to the next.
Okay. All right. Okay. So when it comes to conventions, how important are conventions, do you think, to working as like a new creative? Because you've gone to some conventions yourself, but I know kind of what your opinion is on conventions, but I'm sure they don't know. So
I
what is
think
your take
conventions are important. I think they're very important because you build, that's like I don't want to say chitlin circle. I don't even know if that's the right language, but you go there because that's where you can not just make money, but that's where you also build connections. So when you go to a convention, like let's say here, the Metro Detroit, Motor City, or Capital Con, where the whole Imaginos group went up there this weekend, you're not only making those connections there, people are willing to spend their money and purchase, and you expose to the fans who are willing to pay the money, right? But I think sometimes we get that confused with like, let's say like, even though I love anime conventions, like an anime convention where people are coming to buy cool shit and cosplay, right? And that's still networking, and people still do buy manga and comics. But I think that you really get to push something on the market when you go to conventions and you're exposing your things to not just locally, but just nationwide, globally, whatever it is, you're giving yourself the exposure and you're learning as well. So I think the whole process is very, very important. And I think we have to do more of that. That's how I feel in regards to conventions.
Okay. Now, is there anybody out there creatively that is not within our group that you would want to work with if you had the choice to work with
Yeah,
them
I
or
would want to work with
collaborate with?
Brent Gray. Brent Bridger, he creates Ordeal.
Oh,
So
nice.
I would want to work with him for sure. I think he's a very good creative. Nick Ivy, of course, he's hometown Detroiter. I would love to work with Nick Ivy. So those are the younger up and coming. But Steve Harris, some of the OGs I would want to work with. It's a lot of people, and I don't want to miss any names, but those are just three that came off the top of my head that I would want to work with, and at least in the comic book OEL space. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
Aaron Magruder. Why would I not say that? That's crazy.
Oh, yeah.
That was crazy. But yeah, Aaron Magruder.
Aaron
LaShawn
Magruder just
Thomas.
turned this. He just shut his whole camera off. He's just like, you know what? I'm done with this whole stream. You didn't bring me up. That's it. No, I'm playing.
Exactly.
Okay. So how long when you're working on doing like a page? I know the average time to do a page is maybe about 8 hours, but how long does it take you, Che, to do that?
Probably something similar. And it depends. So I'm gonna say average 8 hours, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter. Because I gotta lay it out. So the biggest part is doing the thumbnails. Thumbnails don't take long, but I'm thinking about paneling out the pages. So thumbnail, right? So those are rough draft sketches, and then after that, actually putting it all on the page. And especially since I start traditional and scan it in, it takes me about 8 hours.
Okay. Now, I don't want to ask you anything too charged, or anything like that. So
Okay.
you can choose to answer this or not answer this. But like, have you ever had any situation creatively that was very difficult for you to navigate it, where it ended up being an unfavorable experience for you, and how did you deal with that?
I have
I didn't
creatively.
ask you like a job question, like people ask you on a job interview, but I mean
Right.
I'm actually serious though, because I'm sure people want
No,
to
I
know
have. I
how
have.
to.
I've had unfavorable creative experiences. And I didn't always handle them well, to be honest, but I learned how to handle them better. And that would be creative differences if I, in regards to like when to get things done. I'm actually pretty agreeable creatively when I'm actually working. But like if I have a certain idea that, the team may not have, it may have been a little bit of like back and forth on, the creative control piece. However, I had to learn to understand that there's a bigger vision and learn how to compromise and meet in the middle. So that's something I am able to do pretty well, is negotiate to get us to the middle and mediate, so that way. So it's easier when, for me, I like to know exactly what I'm getting into. I can be very particular or anal about like the process. If I know the process, I can adjust. But a lot of things that creatively that were more difficult is because you work with a lot of creatives, things can kind of feel all over the place, even if that's not the case. So I like structure like a 9 to 5, right? Because that's what I'm used to. And I try to implement that same way into the creative space. But sometimes as creatives, things are hit or miss because that's the process. Like you throwing things at the wall constantly until something sticks. So just going through that process of sometimes the unknown and trusting other people with your process was difficult. So on a personal level, I just had to pray and work and let go. Like, you know what? This is not a fight worth fighting because I actually believe what, let's say, I'm just using examples. I actually didn't have these personal issues. The editor sees this. I think you should do this with your story. I'm like, I don't see that. And it's like, no, because of A, B, C, D. Because I trust my editors in the process and them having more experience, I may say, you know what? Okay, let's see where we go. Let me yield here, right? But then may be a time where I feel like I don't want this to intrude on my voice. This is what I'm trying to say. This is what I want to say. And then the editors are challenging, okay, why do you want to say this? Okay, flesh it out with me so we can dig a little bit deeper. I don't want it to just be a flat out no if I want to go in this direction with my story. So for me, I think just having certain conversations over and over again with people to kind of push the process forward, I think was helpful. I just think that it could be exhausting because as creatives, we all have a vision. And how do we make our vision cohesive and come together?
Okay. So, as a therapist, how would you, if you had to give a assessment to the I guess the psychological mental capacity of your average professional creative, like what do you think that I don't even want to ask you something leading, because I feel like what I'm about to ask you is more of a leading question, so I'm going to switch up my question. What is your take on um like creative funk, and how creatives deal with that? Do you think that it's healthy, the way that a lot of creatives deal with it, and do you think that there is any middle solution, uh how maybe that, since obviously people act well.
Um, I don't have a specific diagnosis of creative funk, but I do think a lot of creatives go through depression, and a lot of people have mental health diagnoses across the board, creative or not creative, but create because creativity is a coping skill for a lot of people. A lot of times, if you don't feel good, like if you're going through depression, it's hard to work through a depression, any job, not just creatively. So to go through an emotional process such as drawing and writing, and you're going through depression, how and you're doing it for a living, so it's not the coping skill that you thought it would be at that moment. It's like, how do you make a solution? I think one, therapy is a great tool across the board. So I think figuring out additional coping skills as a person and understanding that. And I also think having a good team helps, right? And having supports within the team. So if somebody is going up through the funk, creatively, you still have team members to help pick up the pieces where they can and get you back in. So I think you still have to get back up and continue to work, even if there is a creative funk. But I also think that like your team should honor it, right? And I think there's a difference between somebody using that as in is like, I just don't want to do this no more, and just you started a contract or you started a job and you just don't want to do it because you don't feel like it, versus somebody who may be sick, somebody who has a mental health crisis. So I think we have to be accommodating to that, but I think we have to treat it like a regular job. Give them time off and bring them back. You have a lot of hiatuses because of that. Because yes, I think we should continue to move forward and progress through a project. However, I don't want to be a sick mangaka, right? Where I'm cranking. Now I got back issues. Now I got all these autoimmune diseases. I don't want to be in that position either, where I'm also not healthy because I didn't take care of myself, because I'm trying to force myself to push through a process. And I think it's very hard to vet people's capacities in the creative space. I just think that's a difficult thing, period. I don't think it's just one set solution. Like, creatives need to move through the funk better and faster, and that's it. I think that's a part of it, but I also think that both sides have to come to the middle ground. So I think that if you are an employer, you have to be empathetic. And I think as a creative, you still have to be accountable. So you need both. It's not one or the other. You need both. I think Irvin was kicked off, y'all. You back?
Are we back?
I'm back. I'm here. Are you?
Yeah, I don't know what happened.
Yeah, you a ghost in this bad mug. You know what I'm saying? I said, damn, my dog keep disappearing in the ether of the cyber lane. He AI, y'all.
I'm
Irvin
going.
really AI. Uh-oh, it's happening again. Okay, we back. We back.
No, well, we're getting ready to wrap.
Well, so I'm still here, y'all. If he's checked out on his end, I think it's just some technical difficulty. So we'll be wrapping up soon. Um,
Yeah, now I'm like, I learned not to do the Wi-Fi, the Ethernet cable hooked in now. So now I don't have to do. But what where did you leave off at? You know, I'm not asking you to repeat everything again. If everybody already heard it, I just want to know where we left off at so I can end out properly.
No, I was just saying that I think that it's a combination of things in the creative space with the funk. I think it's a lot of mental health that's undiagnosed and diagnosed, and I think that it's hard to transition from hobby to professional as a creative, because a lot of creative endeavors is based on a joy and a love, and it's also based on coping skills. So I think a part of artist funk, it can be, some of it can just be simply, it can be depression, it can be episodic. We don't know what's going on in people's personal lives, and unpacking a lot of trauma and digging through some trauma while trying to get through. Because a lot of creatives, especially in our space, right, when you look to anime, manga, comics in order to kind of use it as escapism, right, you continue to kind of function in that escapism. So I think it can be very difficult to make that transition. So yeah, I think mental health and being a creative are very correlated. I don't think you have to be creative to have any mental health diagnosis. And I don't think that just because you're creative that you automatically have a mental health diagnosis. But I think taking care of your mental health is one of the most important things that you can do in order to combat the creative funk. I think creating additional coping skills, having supports, doing things that your therapist would recommend you to do, right? I think those things still apply even in the creative funk. And I think that as teams, we give people time off, but we also give people a level of accountability to continue to work, right? So, okay, you still got to get the project done, but we're gonna give you a couple months off. You have a lot of hiatuses that happens on a regular basis because people are in a creative funk. So you're going to have those, and I think that as a team, we should create safety nets for creative funks, like a safety plan. Okay, if this person's going to a funk, we still got this story coming out, or we still got this project, so that way we can keep the ball rolling, also hold people accountable, but also handle people with care and grace. So that's
Okay.
it.
All right. So, we'll just go ahead and wrap out now. Sorry for this, folks. If you're looking back on this, probably gonna have some weird cuts on here at the tail end just because of all the lag. So I'm gonna go ahead and the upload that is gonna go up probably tonight will not be the upload tomorrow because I'm gonna probably take it down and re-upload it again, cutting out this last little part right before this. But with that being said, my last question to you, Che, is what is your end game? You know, when it comes to the end of your creative journey, obviously you don't know. You're young, just like I'm young right now, you know, even though tomorrow's not promised to us. But what do you ultimately want to see happen for your career?
I would like to eventually get things like not just anime, but like maybe work with um, Netflix or movie production, television series. I want to connect a lot of my ideas directly to community work and involvement, you know, utilizing things through my church. I would want to create more community like rec centers, create a plan of action of like, let's say, comic book narrative therapy. So I want to connect mental health, community advocacy, and the manga OEL space together. So that way we can help people kind of navigate through, you know, mental health in a creative way. I want to just make sure I'm just doing my part pretty much. So wherever, you know, God takes me, I'm just following there. But I'm just honestly, I'm blessed, and my end game is to just be as successful as I can be in the industry and continue to stick to my morals and values.
Well, thank you so much for that, Shay. You know, with that being said, as we get ready to wrap up, in 2 weeks, we will obviously be having our next Shining Spotlight episode. We will be having Juan Albaran on our show. He is a mangaka from Spain who has created a manga that has been published in Kodansha Morning magazine
Yeah.
over in Japan. So he's been working over there. I think not even think, I know the manga is now done. It's finished now. But we will be having Juan on in 2 weeks on Shining Spotlight. With that being said, we're looking forward to that interview. I'm not sure if it will either be Che co-hosting with me with that one or Michael. And you've seen both of them on the show before. But with that being said, thank you guys for watching. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, share this video all around. And again, sorry for the interruptions tonight, but thank you guys for sticking with us. This is going to be a great season. We have a whole lot planned, a lot of great guests that, you know, already have agreed to come on board, some really big guests as well. So make sure you follow us for updates. Follow us on TikTok. We're on TikTok now. And soon we'll be putting these shirts up. And oh yeah, one last thing before we go. I forgot to mention Origami Super Punch. Some of you guys have been wondering where has it been at because it was supposed to have been posted on Indie Planet. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus with anything. If the book is ready, we have copies ready to be able to sell to you guys if you guys are interested, because we've had a lot of people reaching out. And I hate the fact that we keep kind of pushing that back or whatever when it was supposed to already have been out. But some unexpected things happen. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus. I'm working on trying to get everything set up on our website to have it to where we'll have shipping available, since it was supposed to be on Indie Planet. So until I get an update from Indie Planet on that, I can't guarantee it the way that I thought it was going to work out. So once we have the postage set up and I know how much that's going to be, then I'll be able to make it available to you guys and we can send them out to you. So just bear with us for a little longer. I apologize since I'd already given you guys a release date and it didn't pan out the way I thought it did. But I just wanted to give those of you guys out there who are looking for an update on that, just wanted to give you an update on that. But with that being said, thank you guys for watching, and we will see you in 2 weeks. If not, follow us on our social media reports for anything sooner than that. So see you guys.